Hello Internet, today's video is an extract from my opinionated guide to Sanity Studio. I want to be really clear at the beginning of this series. These are my opinions. I, of course, write an awful lot of educational content for Sanity, and I want to teach people best practices, but when it comes to these ones, this is just how I like to work. If you've got your own opinions, if you differ from these, then go ahead. I'd love to hear it. But I really want to touch on something perhaps a bit spicy, but very new to me, and something I feel quite strongly about, at least this week, is that I think you should avoid Boolean fields. It's one of the field primitive types that we have in Sanity Studio when you're creating schema, and I think they're a bad idea, and I'd like to be proven otherwise, but let's go and take a look at why with a real life example from Sanity Learn that I ran into just recently. So picture this. I've got a very basic Sanity Studio here. I've got a post type document that only has a type of title, and the request comes in. We should show some documents only to internal users. And because if you're anything like me, you want to work at 1,000,000 miles an hour, the next most logical thing to do is just go and say, well, that's a very easy request to fulfill. Let's say is internal as a name of field, and the type is going to be a Boolean. And so now I've got a Boolean field that marks, is this document internal or not? I can click that true. Now I've got that data to work with. I can update my grok query filters. I can update the attributes that come back from them, and it's all going to be sweet. So I could publish this document now. I can go and bring up our vision tool here. Let's go and query for this document now. So let's give me all of the post type documents, and let's only get is internal ones. We could, of course, also let's just get just the is internal attribute and the title off of that as well. You probably want to send something into the request as well to make sure that this only appears for is internal people. So perhaps is internal. So that's true. So imagine you've got a function there that's going to get that parameter and set it based on the request headers, something like that. So we want to make sure I want to return every document that is internal if the user is internal. So let's say that is internal and is internal, well, that's going to return true. What I'd really want to do there, though, and let's test this actually. Let's really do this properly. I'm going to do it the bad way properly first. My public post is not internal. Let's publish that one too. I'm going to fetch that. So that's working now. What I would really like to see, though, actually is both posts when I am internal and just the public one when I'm not. So how do we work that out? We want to have like a conditional parameter, which is not the most obvious thing in the world to come up with, and really I could probably make another video just on doing this. So when we use the select function, we're doing the first evaluated thing that returns true out of that. And so let's work on this logic later, but the default, the last thing in the select, the last parameter in the select is going to be, so is internal, only return documents where is internal is false. Otherwise, if is internal is true, and is internal, then return true. So include this document in the filtered items that come back if is internal is true. So that now, that should have got me the, let's say is internal is not true. Yes. So there we go. So I've got a public post because is internal is null. There we go. That's right. So what we actually should do there as well is like we can always return a Boolean. So is internal equals true. So if that was null, we'd always get that false. That's correct. We're getting public posts. We're getting two posts there because we're getting IDs that can catch you up sometimes in Vision as well. We're authenticated, so we're getting drafts. Let's just make sure we've published those so we can see it. Okay, great. So I'm not an internal user. I'm only getting public documents. I am an internal user. I should get both. Hooray, it works. So that works. And that's the fastest thing to get going. I've got conditional parameters. I'm filtering the documents based on Booleans. But I guarantee you, if you use a Boolean for something like this, perhaps there are uses for Booleans like when you know I've opted in or I haven't yet opted in. If something is on or off, and it can only ever be one of two states, then yeah, maybe you can use a Boolean. But in my mind, this will almost always happen to you when you use a Boolean for something like this, is that I think days after I implemented this, another request comes in. And when I say another request comes in, it's typically because it's something that I wanted. We also should show documents to authenticated users that aren't internal, but we don't negate those off separately from public. So, well, now what do? Did you find another field? And you say that this one is authenticated, and that's a type of Boolean. We've got all sorts of state issues now. Do we want to allow documents to have both of these selected? That kind of doesn't make sense. Should it only be one or the other? Do those permissions have to flow up and down? Are we suddenly doing role management? We could set initial values on these, and we probably should on both, really, so that new documents start with that set. We could probably write a validation rule, which is like let's get a. Where did that come from? Let's let VS Code stop doing that. Let's get a rule of custom. Oh, that's why. I need to actually make that a function. So rule of custom, the value of this field is, we'll call that is internal, and then we'll grab the document off of the context. And now we can say return if is internal. So like if this field is true and the document has and is authenticated, then only one of these should be set. Otherwise the field's true. That should work. Now what's giving me grief? I shouldn't have a bracket there, and I should. This feels like the sort of thing that all my linters and formatters and things should be catching for me, right? So that's right. Okay, great. So let's duplicate this validation rule as well and swap that logic around. So like that's is authenticated. This is internal. Really, this logic of these two validation rules, you can set this validation rule at the document level, and then you can pass down which paths are invalid when those fields are invalid. That would be better, but I'm just sort of showing off that we can do a custom validation rule here. So we can show, look, if you've got both, you can't have both of those, you can have one. And so that kind of works, but then the logic of running this query, I'm not even going to show the example. It'd be horrible. What do you do? What you do is you delete all of these Booleans. Now, Sanity's got great migration tooling we launched this year, and it used to be really terrible if you'd written yourself into a corner that having to reformat all that data would be awful. It's not as awful as it used to be, but you know what's even better than having to migrate your content is never having to do that at all. So let's go define field, and we're going to use the humble string because we need to consider what is actually the intent of the field and the logic that we're trying to do. And the intent is I want to protect the visibility of the document under certain circumstances. And often when we have that sort of conversation, the content model makes itself self-evident. So it's a visibility field, and the type of it is a string. Now, we don't want it just to be a free form field. That's just, that is inviting chaos. We want to give some predefined options. So let's give this a list here, and we can give this just string values. So it's going to be public, or it's going to be authenticated, or it's going to be internal. And now we've guarded against freeform text entry, and it can only ever be one of three things if the content was authored from Sanity Studio. At the moment, it's not great because you can't see all of those options. So let's also give this a layout of radio instead of drop-down so we can actually see them. Let's give this an initial value of public because that'll be helpful as well. And we don't have to just return like this dumb array of strings either because that's not really giving new authors any great insight into what these things are. So let's go and grab all of these things. I just want to, am I smart enough to get all this in one go? Yes. Okay. So the title is going to be the visibility, and the value is going to be that string that we had there before. But now we can actually give some more flourish. So everyone can see this post, and when it's authenticated, requires login, and when it's internal, requires Sanity.io email address. And now our authors understand what they're selecting when they select one of these options, which is really great as well. And it can only be one of these three things. It's just, this is such a better experience. And what this means is that, you know, the issue where we had just a moment ago, oh no, I added a third state. What happens when tomorrow another request comes in, again, probably from me, is like, well, what if we have VIPs or like paid users versus free users and what plan somebody's on? You could gate against many different things, and we can expand this model. We can also add this logic to the rest of the application. This array here doesn't have to sit here inside the schema. We could export that as a const that the rest of the app uses. So like we could export a const of visibility states, and here's our array now. That's super great. Now we have that available to the rest of the application. Our initial value can be a lot safer now because we can say it's just the first value of that array. And so we get the same behavior as before. We're getting safety throughout the application. And we'll get type safety with these things as well. So let's go ahead and open up this. We would run npx sanity latest schema extract. And so we would extract the schema to a JSON file, which you won't need to use, but sanity typegen will definitely use this in order to create our types. So let's go typegen generate and grab our types. And now if we have a look at the sanity types that are created, here's my post and there's my visibility. So we've got type safety in this as well. So that's the schema is fixed and safe and has multiple options, which we don't need to migrate out of. The authors are going to select the right value. Your TypeScript support has it. The last part, let's go and have a look at the grok query. So this changes once again. The cool part is you can still have that is internal Boolean. I'll give you a Boolean. You want a Boolean? I'll give you a Boolean. Hell, look at this. Internal. We still get the is internal Boolean where one is true because one of these is set to public. My public post, I mustn't have published that one here. Let's make sure I've got these. So my public post is public. My secret post is internal. It's still got those old values there. So let's go and publish that now. Let's run this again. So that one is internal because the visibility is set to internal. And we can also make sure that, okay, so this is internal. Is true. So we need to say this is if the visibility is true, hang on. If the visibility is internal, so the user is internal, so we can still keep this same logic that the query needs to check, is the user internal, because we could say that, or is authenticated. So we can still send those in because that's probably actually quite good to make sure that we're filtering documents in and out as we want them. Let's create another post here. So this is my logged in users post and make sure that's got an authenticated visibility on there. So let's actually return the visibility because I want to see that too. So visibility is authenticated, public, and internal. So let's consider internal users can see everything. So is internal and visibility is internal. That's true. Let's also say if is internal and is internal or is authenticated and visibility is authenticated. So we can still get that flowing down. I think those need to go into brackets. Is that right? So I've got an is internal is true. Is authenticated. Obviously, it would be easier if I just passed in the visibility, and had the logic generate the right one. But here, I'll show the worst way. Because now we've got that same problem that I just wanted to avoid on the schema side. I'm doing it in my front end logic side. Let's say that it's not an internal user, but it is an authenticated user. So I shouldn't see any internal ones. Actually. I shouldn't see any internal ones. So is internal and visibility equals internal, true, but is internal is false. So is internal or is authenticated and visibility authenticated is true. Is internal visibility equals public. So if that's true, then there we go. Okay, so is internal is false. Their visibility is public and authenticated. Great. So my logged in user is now seeing only what they should see. My internal user should see everything. I've messed it up again. Is visibility and visibility is internal. That should be true. So I have internal. Visibility is internal. I have a document that's internal, don't I? Hey, there we go. Okay, there was a hitch there. So that's correct. That's working. All right. So have I convinced you? Let me know. Have I not convinced you? Let me know. What are the cases where Booleans should be used? How am I terribly wrong about this? But that's my take. I'm ripping the Booleans out left, right, and center. I'm all in on strings with options. Let me know what you think, and I'll be back for more in the next video.